Chapter 1. It's unlucky to step on lines and cracks on the sidewalk, but Mom didn't seem to understand this. On the long walk from the subway station, she kept tugging at my arm and telling me to walk straight. It had rained for most of the morning, but now, in the early evening, only a light mist lay heavily in the air. The dark gray smoke from the chimneys along this Brooklyn street didn't have far to travel before blending neatly into the low night sky. We were on our way to visit with one of Mom's friends. Since it wasn't often I got a chance to be with her all by myself, I didn't mind the wet weather, or her quiet mood, or her tugging at my arm. We walked along at a quick pace. I asked a number of times if we were late, but she didn't answer me. Her usually smooth-skinned forehead was somewhat wrinkled, and her dark eyebrows were bent into a slight frown. "What's wrong, Mom?" Her answer was another tug at my arm as I tried to avoid the next line. She released the tight grip she had on my small hand to refer to a piece of paper she had pulled from her pocket. "Are we there yet?" I asked. I looked up for her answer, but there was none. She studied the paper, and then the building numbers. She re-gripped my hand and shrugged again. The wet ground was beginning to make its way in through the hole in my left shoe. I felt my socks sticking to my toes as I tried wiggling and walking at the same time. She stopped suddenly and leaned down. She brushed back some hair sticking up from the top of my head. "Now be a good boy." "I will, Mom." That was my standard answer, whether I planned to be good or not. We climbed a short flight of worn steps bounded by two wrought iron handrails. We entered the old brick building through a highly polished wooden door that squeaked as it opened. We were met in the entranceway by a small nun dressed all in white. She nodded to Mom and smiled at me as she greeted us. Her wire-rimmed eyeglasses sat on the very end of her nose. When she spoke, she looked over the top of them. "What's your name, little fella?" she asked. "Jennings," I replied. "Why, that's a very nice name," she said, as she turned to lead us down a very dark and narrow hallway. It was so quiet and still, and the smell of burnt candle wax made me think we're in some sort of a church. Mom often took me or one of my brothers to some new church somewhere. I held tightly to Mom's warm hand. We reached the end of the hallway and two wooden benches with red felt cushions. "Be a good boy and wait here," the little nun said over her glasses. "Your mother and I have a few things to discuss." I nodded my head as Mom and the nun disappeared into an office and closed the door. I was about to sit on the nice felt cushions when I remembered my pants were still damp from the rain. Instead, I stood on my tiptoes and looked out through the colors of a stained glass window. I closed one eye and moved from one colored glass to the next. "Jennings!" I was jolted away from my world of pink cars and green buildings by the little nun. I turned and re-grasped Mom's hand. She looked sad and red-eyed. "What's wrong, Mom?" She shook her head and squeezed my hand as we walked back down the hall. We stopped at a door about halfway down, and the nun opened it. The room was large and blue and filled with noisy children. As we entered, all the children stopped and stared at us. Their silence made me uncomfortable. Mom leaned down to help me off with my coat, but then hugged me. She kissed my face a number of times. She took one last swipe at my cowlick. I could see the tears on her lower lid as she forced a smile. She frightened me, so I clung to her arm. "Mom, what's wrong?" She brought me close to her once again and hugged me. My coat was still only part way off when she straightened up. She gripped my shoulders to hold me off. In a husky sort of voice, she said, "I'll be right back." She turned and slipped through the open door. The nun followed, closing the door behind her. They left me in the middle of what seemed to be 1,000 staring eyes. I felt strange and tingly all over. I couldn't move. I left my coat hanging from one shoulder. The eyes kept staring while my mind raced. What's wrong with Mom? Why did she push me away from her? Where is she? Where am I? Slowly the children began to resume their play, first some and then all. As they played, I felt more and more as though I could move, but I didn't. When the tension eased, I began to look around the room. The blue walls were paint-chipped and peeling. Night had now blackened the other side of two very large frosted windows on one side of the room. Above the worn wooden floor hung about half a dozen globe lamps. A high curb ran all the way around the room. I didn't know what it was for until I saw a little girl nearly run down by a speeding tricycle. The curb was for safety. Around the room, at the edge of the curb, there were 4 large pillars holding up the whole place. And straight across from me, there were 2 doors with signs over them. One said boys, and the other said girls. I made my way around to the corner of the room behind one of the pillars. I sat down. I watched the kids playing and fighting. They all seemed to want to ride the few bicycles and tricycles that were there, but only the bigger kids were on them. There was a large purple tricycle I really liked. I wondered how I might get a turn at riding it. 2 boys entered the room and headed straight for the tricycle. They abruptly dumped the boy who was on the bike to the floor and rode off laughing. I drew up my legs and folded my arms over them. I laid my head sideways atop my arms and closed my eyes. I was getting sleepy. "Get up from there," snapped a gruff-sounding nun. She was towering above me, and she was angry. "What are you doing down there?" I was startled and groggy. I tried to get to my feet when she pulled me up by my coat collar. "I'm waiting for my mother." "Never mind that." She began dragging me across the floor of the now empty room. I had obviously fallen asleep, and all the children had gone home. "But I'm waiting for my mother," I garbled out through my tightly grasped coat collar. In one great sweep, she opened the door, marked boys, and flung me through it. I staggered into a pitch-black darkness. "Get along." "But, sister, get along." She gathered a large chunk of my coat sleeve and arm and lifted part of me off the ground. I was forced through the darkness into a partially lighted room. The room was long and narrow. On one side, separated by dark doorways, were small pink lights very close to the floor. They lit the bottom part of the room, making the top part seem dark and endless. Along the other wall, running the entire length of the room, was a row of beds, every 2 separated by barred windows. I was frightened. She pushed me through one of the dark doorways. She flipped a switch, flooding the room with light. It was a bathroom made of a million tiny white tiles. Floor, ceiling, walls, and everything. The first thing I thought of was chiclets. "Your number's 27. Don't forget it." She pointed to the far side of the room and a row of hooks with numbers above them. Most of the hooks had clothes hanging from them, some of them only pajamas. "Do you have a toothbrush?" Thinking of the one I had at home, I said yes. "Wash, brush, and change, and don't make a mess." She left as quickly as she spoke, and I was glad. I was afraid of her. I lifted the pair of pajamas off hook number 27. I sat on the long wooden bench under the hooks and looked around. There was a row of sinks on one side of the room and a row of toilets on the other. As I changed into the pajamas, I couldn't stop the tears edging toward my eyes. I went over to one of the sinks and turned on the water. It was cold. I wet my face and looked around for a towel. There was none. I dabbed my wet face with my sleeve. "What are you doing?" She screamed as she re-entered the room. She really startled me. "I want my mother," I cried. She slapped my face so hard I felt a million needles of heat rush into my face and cheek. "She's gone. Now stop that. Where's your toothbrush?" It's... I was in a race between breathing and speaking. "At home?" From nowhere, she produced a paper-wrapped toothbrush and shoved it at me. I took it and brought it to my mouth to tear off the paper with my teeth. She slapped me again. "That's not the way we do things around here." I held my stinging face. I just wanted to take off "Well, that's not the way we do things around here." She left in a huff, mumbling to herself. I found some toothpaste on one of the sinks and put some on the paper-wrapped brush. I brushed my teeth. It was yucky, but that's how she wanted it. When I finished brushing, I stuck the brush in the back pocket of my hanging brown corduroy pants and went over to the doorway. I peeked out. She was at the far end of the darkened room at a desk with a small lighted lamp. I switched off the bathroom light and approached her. I stood in front of her desk. She ignored me. She got to her feet and brushed past me. "Come on." I followed her down the long row of beds. She stopped at bed number 27 and pointed to it. Without another word, she returned to her desk. I gathered up the waist part of the pajamas and with great difficulty climbed up and into the very high white metal bed. There were bars at the top and bottom. I slipped beneath the cold sheets. There was a strong smell of rubber, and the blanket was itchy. I lay face up, trying to see the shapes on the dark ceiling. I could not. I heard an occasional cough and a sniffle. I heard a small voice call out so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "Sister Frances?" I waited for the response, but there was none. A warm tear ran down my cheek and into my ear. Where was I, and why was I here? A street lamp somewhere outside cast eerie shadows across the top of my bed covers. In the gray light, I wondered why Mom hadn't come back for me. I awoke to the sound of children's voices. I opened my eyes and looked around. The room looked different from the night before. It was bigger and brighter, and it had a ceiling. Kids were running in all directions. I recognized a lot of them from the playroom. They hadn't gone home after all. There was a chest next to the bed. I climbed down from the bed. Sister Frances wasn't at her desk. Instead, there was a younger nun. She was prettier, with dark eyebrows and a dimple on each cheek. She was fastening the shirt buttons for one of the little kids. She was smiling. I entered the bathroom. To my relief, all my things were still there. I hung the pajamas on the hook and stuffed the toothbrush into the top pocket. I didn't feel like brushing again. I dabbed a drop of water on each eye and dried with my shirt sleeve. I was too afraid to ask anyone where they got their towels and face cloths from, and besides, I didn't care. Mom would be here soon and I could go home. I put on my street coat and followed some of the boys out of the bathroom. They were lining up in front of the bed, so I did the same. I noticed I was the only one wearing my street coat. I guess nobody else was leaving but me. "Why not put your coat on the hook?" the nun with the dimples asked as she approached me. "I'm going home," I said. "Well, we're going to have breakfast first. Why not hang up your coat?" I left the line and hung up my coat. When I returned, the dimpled nun was gone. I stood by the bed. Sister Frances entered the room and the line stiffened. She was tall and thin. Her face was shiny and drawn. She spoke not a word, but rather made a clicking sound with a clicker she held down by her side. I remembered having one of those clickers. I got it in a box of Cracker Jacks. With each click, the children responded, and I followed. We shuffled down a maze of hallways until we reached a dining room. It was an enormous room, very much like the lunchroom at school. It had rows and rows of tables, with a dozen or so chairs at each table. As we entered the room, we weaved like a snake around the rows of tables. Girls entering from the other side did the same. At the sound of a click, we stopped. On the next, we turned. There in front of me was chair number 27. I sat. A terrible pain ripped into my left ear. Sister Frances had grabbed hold of my ear and lifted me out of the chair. She clicked the others to sit before she let go of me. "Sit when you're supposed to, not a moment before." She pointed to a spot behind the chair. "Now stand there." I stood where she pointed. I stared at the ceiling, trying not to cry. The ceiling in this room looked exactly like the one in the playroom. It had the same globe lamps and the same tiny cracks. I wondered what time Mom might come for me. What was this place, and why were all these kids here? I hoped I wouldn't have to stay too much longer. I didn't like Sister Frances. She hurt me. The kids took forever to eat. The room smelled like waffles or pancakes. I didn't know which, and I wasn't about to look down to find out. A sharp click brought me back to the room, and the kids to their feet. The next series of clicks took us from the dining room, down a few more hallways, to some sort of playroom with a green and white tile floor. As the line entered the room, the kids broke ranks. They ran for the things they most wanted to play with. I stayed by the door. One whole wall of the room was made up of glass doors. A few of the panes were cracked, while others were missing altogether. They had been replaced by panels of wood. The doors opened out onto a gray stone courtyard with a high wire mesh fence. There were shelves along two of the walls with all sorts of playthings: games, puzzles, toys, blocks, and balls. A number of tables with painted checkerboard tops and chairs were scattered about the room. I took a seat at the table nearest the door. I ran my fingernail along the edge of one of the painted checkerboards to see if it would move. It didn't. I watched the kids playing and fighting. I felt terribly alone. Maybe Mom was mad at me for something. If If I had done something bad, it must have been terrible. I couldn't remember what it was. "Who are you?" a voice jolted me. There were 4 boys standing around me. "Who are you?" one of them repeated in a tough manner. 27, I said without thinking. They roared with laughter before I had a chance to correct myself. "Jennings, my name is Jennings," I said over their laughter. "What's your first name?" The same boy asked in an equally tough manner. "That is my first name." They laughed even louder. The boy who spoke was bigger and older than nearly every kid in the room. He had black curly hair and a few pimples around his chin and near his temples. He announced to everyone in the room that my name was Jenny. I tried correcting him, but I got tongue-tied. They laughed more. The embarrassment made my tears come easily. I clenched my fists and tried to stand, but he grabbed my wrist and flung me back into the chair. "Look, he's not a boy, he's a girl." He pointed his finger at me. "His name is Jenny, and he cries." I tried wiping my tears with every dry thing I had, my sleeves, my fingers, the palms of my hands. I insisted I wasn't crying and wasn't a girl, but nobody heard me. I covered my face with my hands as the laughter and the boys faded away. "I don't think you're a girl." I removed my hands and saw a boy about my age sitting across from me. "I'm not a girl, I'm a boy." "My name is Mark, and my number is 9, he said rather proudly. He was short and chubby and wore a large pair of horn-rimmed glasses. His hair was dark and lay flat on his head except for a few cowlicks that stuck up from the back. He looked sort of like an owl. "That's a nice number," I said. "My name is Jennings, and I'm 27. 27? He exclaimed with a jolt of his head. "Years old?" "No," I laughed. 27 is my number. I'm only 8.5 years old. It was the first time I had laughed since I'd arrived. "Don't pay no attention to these jerks," he said as he flipped his thumb in their direction. "They pick on everybody, all the time." I wasn't really listening to what he was saying. I asked, "Where are we?" "The day room." He looked somewhat surprised at my question. "No, I mean this whole place." "Oh, it's the home of the angels." "Oh," I said quietly. My face told him I still didn't know where I was. "It's a home, a home for orphan and foster kids." "A home?" I was numb. "For orphans?" He shook his head. "Uh-huh." "Am I an orphan?" "I don't know. Are you?" "I don't know. My mother brought me here. She said she'd be right back." "Well, then you're a foster kid," he said matter-of-factly. "I am? I'm a foster kid?" "Uh-huh." "What's a foster kid?" "Oh, boy." He pushed his index finger at his glasses as though they were about to fall off his face. "A foster kid is, he's a kid who's got parents, but they don't want him no more." "My mother wants me," I snapped. Mark sat calmly where he was. Slowly he spoke. "Then why are you here?" I couldn't answer that question. My lower lip began to quiver. "Oh, boy. He said it's better to be a foster kid than an orphan." "Why is that?" I squeaked out. The tears were edging toward my eyelids. I was trying to fight them off. "Well, a foster kid gets to leave this place." "Oh, yeah?" I blinked. I quickly wiped a runaway tear. "Will Mom come for me? Will I go home soon?" "Well, I don't know about that, but foster kids sometimes go and live in people's houses." "People's houses? What people's houses?" "I don't know, just people. They come and take one kid or another, just people." "I don't want to live in people's houses." "Oh, boy," he said with a huff. I guess I got him mad at me because he stopped talking. "Are they nice people?" I asked. I wanted him to talk to me again. "I don't know," he said. "I'm an orphan." "You mean an orphan don't get to live in people's houses?" Again, he pushed back his glasses. "Most don't, some do, the little ones, but most don't." "Did you ever—" "No," he cut me off quickly. "Nobody wants a fat, ugly Four-Eyes." His response startled me. "It ain't so bad." He looked around, almost talking to himself. "Once you get to learn all the rules, it ain't so bad." "How long have you been here?" "I've always been here. Nobody wanted me when I was little, so I've always been here. You want to play checkers?" I nodded my head. He slipped away to get the playing pieces. I couldn't believe Mom didn't want me anymore. I tried to remember what bad thing I did for Mom to leave me here. Mark returned. We played 2 games of checkers. Neither of us spoke very much. I lost both games. You don't play very well, do you? I guess I'm just not paying too much attention. I want to go home. Now that's rule number 1, he shot back sternly. Don't ever think about going home. But I want to. I know you want to. We all do. Well, maybe not home, but someplace. He pushed back his glasses. But you can't go around all day thinking about it. You'll go nuts. He shook his head as he began setting up the pieces for the next game. It's hard not to think about, I murmured. I know, but you'll get used to it. You have to. We began another game. I tried to obey rule number 1, but it was just too hard. I didn't like this place and I wanted to go home. A click stopped us in mid-move. The next click sent everyone scurrying around the room, forming lines. I stood behind Mark to wait for the next click. I hoped it was for lunch. I was starving. We shuffled our way back through the same maze of hallways to the dining room. As we snaked around the rows of tables, I tried to pick up a hint of what we might be having. Only rolls and butter could be seen. We stopped on a click and turned on the next. I was standing in front of chair number 10. Instantly, I was pushed aside by the boy who owned the number. Lost and in trouble again, I closed my eyes and covered my ears as I caught sight of Sister Frances's angry face heading toward me. She grabbed me by the hair and dragged me to chair 27. She clicked the others to sit. Her free hand was digging straight into my shoulder. All I could do was scrunch up my head and neck and wait. Needless to say, again, I did not sit or eat. Lunch seemed so much longer than breakfast. I paid no attention to the snickers of the other kids. Instead, I studied the kid in chair 26. He had dirty blonde hair and large funny ears. I didn't see the front of his face, but I only cared about the back of his head. Lunch ended with my eyes still glued to the back of 26's head. I thought about Mark saying once you learn the rules, it ain't so bad. If I didn't learn the rules, I was going to starve to death. The snake slid into a school-type playroom. There were rows of desks toward the front with play tables and chairs in the rear. There were 3 large blackboards in the front part of the room with chalk scribbles all over them. A little old nun, about 100 years old maybe, sat in one corner of the room, half reading and half sleeping. The kids got right into drawing and coloring and painting. I sat with my back against one of the blackboards. The late rain suddenly turned heavy, very heavy. It slapped against the wall of glass doors. A clap of lightning followed by a roll of thunder caused a number of oohs and ahs. I kept my eyes on number 26. What are you looking at? Mark asked as he took a seat next to me. It's not a what, it's a who. 26. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were behind me. It's not your fault. Well, I should have watched. He stuck his hand under his shirt and pulled out a roll. It's the best I could do, he said as he handed it to me. I ate everything else. I snatched up the roll and ate it. It disappeared in about 2 bites. It would have gone in 1 if my mouth had been a little bigger. I'll make sure you're in the right spot for dinner. I'll make sure I'm in the right spot from now on, I said, with my eyes wide and my tongue hanging out. If I don't, I mimicked my last words by making believe I hung myself. We were playing tic-tac-toe on the blackboard and laughing about the little nun sleeping in the corner when we were interrupted. What are you laughing at, fatso? It was the same 4 boys who had picked on me earlier. The curly-headed, pimple-faced one kid again did the talking. He was obviously addressing Mark. I asked you something, fatso. You deaf or something? Mark ignored him and drew another set of lines for our game. I was nervous, but I followed Mark's lead. I placed an X in one of the squares. Hey, everybody, we got a deaf Dumbo and a little girl over here. They're writing their names in boxes. He managed to get everyone laughing. Mark seemed to be very natural at ignoring him. I had to work hard at it. They leveled a few more remarks, mostly at Mark, but some at me, before they moved off to bother someone else. Doesn't he bother you? I asked. Sure he does, but I'm not going to let him know it. He just wants someone to fight with, that's all. He says lots of things to get you mad. And when you do, wham, he lets you have it. He thinks he's the toughest kid in here. Is he? Yeah, I guess so. But one of these days, he made a gesture in the air with his fist. Butch is gonna get it. Is that his name, Butch? Yeah, he placed an O in a box. Did you ever notice how all the tough kids are named Butch, I asked. He laughed. I guess they wouldn't be so tough if their names were Felix or Elmer or something. Maybe they'd be tougher. We laughed. We stopped at the same time to look around for Butch. He wasn't there. We laughed harder. I got 2 tough brothers. Well, maybe more mean than tough. Are their names Butch? He laughed. No, George and Walter. And they're mean? Why do you say they're mean? They're always picking on Larry and me. They mimic them. Do this and do that. Who's Larry? Oh, he's another brother. Another one? How many you got? 5. 5? He leaned back as though he were about to faint. I never heard of anybody with 5 brothers. Do you have any sisters? No, not no more. I had one, Marianne, but she died a little while after she was born. Did she just die? Oh, no, she died a long time ago. She would have been 6 just 2 weeks ago, October 5th. I know her birthday 'cause Mama always cries a lot on her birthday. When's your birthday? I surprised him with the question. I don't got no birthday. At least I don't know when it is. How old are you? I don't know, maybe 8 or 9, something like that. Are all your brothers older than you? He seemed to want to change the subject away from himself. No, I got 4 older and 1 younger. I made a face when I said the word younger. What's wrong with him? Oh, nothing. Gene's just a pest, that's all. He's 4. I curled the corners of my mouth. What a pest. Is he in a home too? I was stunned by the thought. Tears began to well up in my eyes. I don't know, I said. Oh, boy, I'm sorry I asked. We won't talk about your brothers no more. He went about drawing another set of lines on the board. It's all right, I said weakly. I blinked away the thought of Gene being in a place like this. Nah, I don't want you to start bawling on me. Not bawling, I insisted. We can talk about my brothers if you want to. I like to hear about brothers and things like that. Well, George is my oldest brother, I said, as I marked an X in the upper right-hand corner. He's real good at stickball. He can hit 3 sewers. What's 3 sewers? Oh, that's like hitting the ball a whole block. Wow, his eyes widened. That's far. Yeah, he's pretty strong. He'd be a real good brother if he didn't drink and get real mean and argue with Mom. He drinks? How old is he? 15. 15? And he drinks? I nodded my head. Don't your father hit him or nothing? I ain't got no father. He died in the war a long time ago. Well, what about your mother? Don't she hit him? No, she's afraid of him. We're all afraid of him, except maybe Walter. He's not afraid of him. He fights with him all the time. How old is he? 14. He's real smart. I raised my eyebrows. He's always studying and thinking. Click. I froze, but nobody else did. What's happening? I gotta go to class, Mark said as he wiped the chalk from his hands on the back of his pants. All lifers go to class now. I'll see you later. Don't I go? No, you're not a lifer. You're a part-timer. A part-timer? Yeah, I don't got time to explain it to you now, but I will later. He left to join a line that was leaving the room. I shot a quick glance around the room. Luckily, 26 was still there. The room was quieter now. Butch was gone, and so were his friends. Most of the kids who were left were drawing or coloring or just sitting and thinking. They were probably all breaking rule number 1, but then again, so was I. The rain continued to fall heavily against the glass doors. I wondered where all my brothers were. Could they be in places like this? I was hungry. I found myself really hoping the clicker would sound. I was sure the next one would be for dinner. Sharp stabs of lightning and the roll of thunder frightened some of the kids. Finally, the clicker sounded. As I and the snake weaved its way around the tables, I smelled the food. I had no idea what it was, but I didn't care. I stopped on the click and turned. I waited years for the one that would let me sit and eat. Click. About a foot from me was a large stack of white bread, just standing there. I wanted to grab a piece, but I was afraid. I waited for someone else to grab first. Nobody did. One of the kids took a drink of his milk. I did the same. I never realized how good milk tasted. I saw a few nuns wearing aprons tied around their necks and waists. They were carrying large bowls of something. One of them reached my table. I watched her serve stew to every kid at the table. By the time she got to me, I had already dreamed of eating everyone's stew. It was great. She scooped up a large ladle of stew and dumped it into my bowl. It smelled wonderful. I rechecked what everyone else was doing. They were eating. I lifted my spoon and dived in. I ate everything in the bowl and about 3 pieces of bread. It wasn't until the kid next to me slid his unfinished bowl in front of me that I realized the stew really didn't have much of a taste. I smiled at him and ate his too. Click. It was over. I grabbed up a slice of bread and stuffed it into my shirt. The clicks took me and the line from the dining room. We entered the playroom. Mark and I sat on the curb. We lifted our legs each time a cycle came too close and placed them back down again in unison. What's a part-timer, I asked, and why don't they go to school? They got no room for everybody. The part-timer ain't gonna be here all that long. You'll either go home or beeline out to live with somebody. He added quickly, don't go bawling on me now. Don't mean you will be lent out. I was just using that as a for instance. I'm not going to bawl. Good. Lifers are here all the time, so we go to school. See? Yeah, I see. So, tell me about your other 2 brothers. Larry and the other one, what's his name? Jerome? Yeah, tell me about Larry and Jerome. Well, I can't tell you too much about Jerome. I never met him. You never met him? You never met your own brother? He was startled. No, he's in a hospital somewhere, dying. Dying? Dying of what? A heart condition. My mother said we had to pray for him because he was going to die pretty soon. How soon? I don't know, pretty soon. How old is he? He's, let me think. He's about 10. He's been in the hospital for as long as I can remember. He's a lifer then, like me. Yeah, I guess so. I had never thought about it like that, but I guess so. Is Larry gonna die too? No, I chuckled. He thinks he is sometimes. He's always being picked on to do this and do that. George and Walter take turns making him do things around the house, like cleaning and doing the dishes and stuff like that. Mom works nights for the phone company and sleeps during the day, so George and Walter sort of run things. Butch would fit in real good there, he laughed. He sure would. Walter calls Larry the dumb ox, and George calls him Four Eyes. I shot a glance at Mark as he pushed his glasses back on his face. I'm sorry, I don't call him It's okay. They call everybody with glasses Four Eyes. Well, I don't. I don't call him dumb ox either. I like Larry. He's my favorite brother. I think I would like Larry too. I think I'd like to have all your brothers. Oh, no, you wouldn't. Well, I don't have any brothers, so I wouldn't mind a pesty one or even a mean one, just so long as I had one. I had never thought about it like that. I turned it over in my mind. No, Mark, you wouldn't like just any kind of brother. You'd like a good one like Larry, but not just any kind. We lifted our legs once again as the big purple tricycle zoomed past. What does it take to get a ride on that bike? I asked. Guts, he laughed. I saw Butch and his friends throw a kid to the floor last night. That's why it takes guts, and they're not his friends. Oh, I thought they were his friends. No, there are no friends in here. They just hang around him and laugh when he laughs. They don't want him to pick on them. What do you mean there are no friends in here? Aren't we friends? He didn't answer me. He sat looking out across the floor at the kids playing and fighting. Hey, I'm tired. Want to go to bed? He stretched and shook as though he had a chill. Sure, okay. I knew he didn't want to answer me, and he knew I knew. We dashed across the speedway, laughing the whole route. There were only a few kids in the dormitory and no nuns. We reached Mark's bed first, and he veered off. I'll meet you in the bathroom, he said. His arms were outstretched, and he made the sound of a plane. I reached bed number 27 and decided to look through the small cabinet alongside the bed to see what was in it. I found a bar of soap, some toothpaste, a towel and face cloth, and a laundry bag. I took everything but the laundry bag and rejoined Mark in the bathroom. I changed into the pajamas and hung my things on the hook. I washed and dried my face and put toothpaste on the paper-wrapped brush. I began brushing my teeth. What are you doing? Mark said with laughter in his voice. I'm brushing my teeth, I garbled out, the brush still sticking out of my mouth. Don't you take the paper off first? I tried to take it off last night, but I got hit for it. Really? Really? Sister Frances hit me. She gave me that brush, and when I tried to take the paper off of my teeth, she hit me. She said, that's not the way we do things around here. Mark went hysterical with laughter. I thought he liked the way I mimicked Sister Frances's voice, but I was wrong. She didn't mean not to take the paper off, he laughed. She meant not to take it off with your teeth. We laughed so hard I thought I was going to burst. My foaming mouth only made us laugh harder. I tried picking some of the soggy paper off my brush and out of my mouth. Sister Frances passed the bathroom and stuck her head in. Shut up in here, she scolded. Mark and I finished our laughing in silence, or at least as silently as we could. We were just wiping the last of the water off the sinks when I asked, Mark, what did you mean before when you said there ain't no friends in here? I'm sure he didn't like the question, but I had to know the answer. Well, it's a rule. Not a home rule, like when to sit or when to eat or like that, but a kid's rule. He paused. A kid's rule when you're supposed to learn on your own, because nobody likes to talk about it. You know what I mean? My face showed him I didn't. Oh boy, he said, it's like this. If you got a friend in here and they go away someplace, then you're left by yourself, alone. And if you keep making friends and they keep going away, then over and over again you're alone. He paused. It hurts. Mark dashed from the room. He knew he'd said more than he wanted to. I left the bathroom. I didn't agree with what Mark said. I thought having a friend would make things easier. But then I wasn't a lifer and he was. I put my things in the cabinet beside the bed and started to climb up. Where are you going? Mark startled me out of my thoughts. To bed, shouldn't I? He shook his head no, and waved his hand for me to follow him. We walked to Sister Frances's desk. She was not there. A few kids were already lining up in front of the desk. What are we waiting for? Shh, came the response from every kid there. I shut up. I couldn't imagine what we were waiting for. Just then a nun entered the dormitory. She was the same nun I saw earlier that morning, buttoning the boy's shirt and smiling. She was smiling again. Without knowing her, I liked her. Good evening, children, she said warmly. I was shocked. I didn't think anyone big was ever going to talk nice to us kids. Good evening, Sister Claire, the children responded, almost in song. She pulled out a key from a pocket and inserted it into the lock of a cabinet on the wall behind the desk. As she turned the key, all the kids turned it with her. It was the strangest thing. When she opened the cabinet door, I understood. The cabinet was filled with all sorts of stuffed animals, bears and dogs and monkeys and rabbits and everything. I was so excited. She removed the animals one at a time. She placed each animal in the arms of the one who most wanted that particular animal. The other's arms remained outstretched and wanting. Don't you want one? She asked. She was looking directly at me. I nodded my head. I did. I hadn't realized I had wrapped both my arms around my own body, as though I were hugging all the animals. I guess because my arms were not outstretched and open, she thought I might not want one. I raised my arms. She smiled broadly and placed a fuzzy brown and white dog with black floppy ears in my arms. I cradled the dog to my chest and tucked his big nose under my chin. I walked back to the bed. I made a nice little place for the dog next to my pillow, placed him down gently, and climbed in after him. What's your name? I asked. I paused as though I were giving him time to answer. Oh, Doggy, that's a nice name. My name is Jennings. He did not laugh. I slipped down beneath the covers and pulled Doggy down after me. I cuddled him close to me. My mother brought me here. She said she'd be right back. I guess she got busy doing something else, 'cause she really loves me and wants me. Yeah, that's it. She got very busy. She'll be here soon to take me home. And you can come with me. Would you like that? He said he would, and I was happy. I'm going to ask Mom to take Mark home, too. With all my brothers around, she won't even notice an extra kid. Jennings. I was startled by a voice. I poked my head from beneath the covers to see Sister Claire standing above me. Hello, I said and grinned. I was just saying hello to Doggy. I'm sorry if I made too much noise. No, you weren't making any noise. I just came by to say hello. May I sit down? She smiled. Yes, sister. I pushed back on my elbows to lift myself up a little. I'm as new here as you are, she said. I started here the day before you came. Do you know where my mother is? Your mother went away to rest. She wasn't feeling very well. You know, it's hard for her to raise all you boys all by herself and hold down a job at the same time. And it's hard for her to face Jerome being sick. Do you know about Jerome? I nodded my head. Well, you have to be a strong soldier until your mother is better, all right? All right, I said as I started to cry. Sister Claire put both her arms around me and held me. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I saw was the morning sun. I wanted to show Doggy. Hey, Doggy, I whispered. I lifted the covers to retrieve him, but he wasn't there. Hey, Doggy, where are you? I felt around the tightly tucked edges of the bed, but still no Doggy. I stretched my neck out as far over the side of the bed as possible without falling to the floor. No Doggy. I'd lost him. I pulled myself back up and slid deep beneath the covers. As quietly as I could, I cried. I sharp-wrapped my ankles in a shout. Last one up's a rotten egg. Brought my head from beneath the covers. Come on, Jennings. Mark shouted from the bathroom doorway, then disappeared inside. I climbed down from the bed, took my things from the cabinet, glanced once more under the bed, then followed Mark. He was at his hook when I reached mine. Hi, sleepyhead, he said. Hi. What's the matter with you? Nothing. Nothing? When you look like that? I looked around to see that nobody was within earshot of me. I lost Doggy. My lip quivered. Oh, boy, he chuckled. It's not funny. I lost him. I looked everywhere. You didn't lose him. They took him. They took him? Who took him? The nuns did. He turned and took his shirt from the hook. Why? Why? He said impatiently without looking at me. They just do, that's all. After we go to sleep. He looked at me. A slight moistness covered his eyes, and he swallowed. They come around and collect them. But why? It's the rules, he snapped. They cage the animals at night. It's the rules.